Have you ever heard of Jacob? The man whose life was transformed in an unexpected way, going from a deceiver to the patriarch of a great nation. But what you may not know is that his journey was marked by struggle, faith, and a divine promise. That changed not only his life, but the life of the entire people of Israel. Stay with me and discover how Jacob's story reflects the ups and downs of our own faith. Jacob, son of Isaac and Rebekah, grandson of Abraham, was a character marked by a trajectory full of challenges and choices that shaped his life in a significant way. From the moment of his birth, he already demonstrated a shrewd and determined nature. When he was born, he grabbed hold of his twin brother Esau's heel, as if he were struggling to win something from the beginning. This gesture symbolized the rivalry that would exist between the two brothers throughout Jacob's life. From this act, the Bible gives us insight into Jacob's competitive nature and his tendency to fight for what he wanted. This rivalry was not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. Its very name, Jacob, which means he who holds by the heel or deceiver, seems to reflect his tendency to seek advantage, often at the expense of others. This early context of Jacob's life is important, as he was not simply an unlucky young man or a victim of circumstances, but a man who, from an early age, was forged by a survival instinct that would lead him to act in unexpected ways to secure his place in the world. Arelico com Esau, suerma mais valio, foiuma das, mais marcantes, dessa fez de sua vida, da vezo, faz, o filho, primogenito, e, teora, recomente, o mais fave, orcido para herdar, as bancos de su pai, Yaco com sua astucia, consegue, se colocar, imuma, pusaka de vantagem. This rivalry culminated in the famous story of the exchange of the birthright. Jacob, in a moment of great insight and perhaps a bit of desperation, bought Esau's birthright for a bowl of lentils. This seemingly simple transaction had profound repercussions on the history of his family and the destiny of future generations. Jacob's story thus begins in a complex way, not only because of the symbolism of his birth, but also because of his cunning character and his ability to manipulate circumstances to his advantage. Although his actions may seem selfish and manipulative, they reflect the internal struggle of a man who, from an early age, understood that life would not be easy and that he would have to fight for what he wanted, even if it meant defying family norms and values. This relentless search for identity and a place in the world would be a constant throughout his journey. The episode of Jacob's deception, which occurs in Genesis 27, is one of the most dramatic and emblematic moments of his life. The story reveals not only Jacob's cunning, but also the complex family dynamics that marked the relationship between him, his brother, Esau, and his parents, Isaac and Rebekah. Jacob knew that his father Isaac's blessing was crucial to his future, and in a moment of emotional weakness on his father's part, he saw an opportunity. Isaac, now elderly and with failing eyesight, was about to bless his firstborn son Esau, and this would mean that Esau would inherit the position of leadership over the family and the divine blessings. Promised to Abraham and Isaac, it was an immense privilege, a guarantee of prosperity, and the continuation of the promise made by God to the patriarchs. However, Rebekah, Jacob's mother, had heard Isaac's plan and knew that, according to the prophecy received before Jacob was born, it would be Jacob who would inherit the blessing, not Esau. In a carefully crafted plot, Rebekah instructs Jacob to disguise himself as Esau, wearing goatskins to fool his blind father and preparing a dish of food that imitates Isaac's favorite, all so that Jacob can receive his father's blessing. Jacob, already possessing a shrewd nature, hesitantly follows his mother's instructions and presents himself before Isaac. The exchange of identities, a moment of pure deceit, is carried out with a well-crafted lie full of deception. Isaac, suspicious of the voice but convinced by the touch of the goatskin and the taste of the food, ends up believing that Jacob is, in fact, Esau. And so, Isaac blesses Jacob, passing on to him the right to the birthright. Esau's reaction upon discovering the betrayal is devastating. He becomes furious and, upon realizing what has happened, cries out for a blessing as well. But Isaac, already aware of the mistake he has made, states that the blessing given to Jacob cannot be taken away. Jacob, therefore, not only deceived his father and stole his brother's birthright, but he also created a great family conflict that would last for many years. This episode not only reveals Jacob's cunning, but also his lack of trust in God's plan. Although Jacob was a very intelligent man and capable of manipulating situations to his advantage, his action demonstrates a moment of desperation. He sought blessing through dishonest means, as if he was afraid that God would not be able to fulfill the promise made to him. The lie, which seemed like a momentary solution, brought with it profound consequences. By deceiving his father and stealing Esau's blessing, Jacob not only created a family conflict, but also began a series of challenges that he would have to face in the years to come. As punishment, and to avoid Esau's wrath, Jacob was forced to flee to the home of his uncle Laban, an equally cunning man, where he would face a new series of deceptions and challenges. However, this escape was also a turning point in Jacob's life. Although he had physically distanced himself from his family, he could not escape the spiritual consequences of his actions. The plot of deception and the pain of separation from his family had wrought havoc on Jacob, but it had also brought him closer to God in ways he could not have imagined. The story of Jacob's deception teaches us about the struggle for blessing and the consequences of dishonesty. It reminds us that no matter how much we try to control our destiny, wrong choices can have unexpected and lasting consequences.
Jacob's
attempt to manipulate the future created a more difficult future, but also an opportunity for personal and spiritual growth. Jacob's journey, now on the run from his home and his brother Esau, seemed to be one of desolation and loneliness. After deceiving his father and causing great family strife, Jacob was heading toward his uncle Laban's house, not knowing exactly what the future held for him. This escape, which began as a search for safety, quickly turned into a defining moment in Jacob's life, a spiritual and personal turning point. During the journey, as night fell, Jacob decided to rest in a secluded spot. Using a stone as a pillow, he lay down and fell asleep. It was then that he had a profound and impactful dream, a dream that would not only shape his life, but would also be a milestone in the history of the people of Israel. Jacob's dream was extraordinary and full of symbolism. He saw a ladder reaching up to heaven, with angels ascending and descending it. This ladder, with its steps connecting heaven to earth, represented the interaction between the divine and the human, between the transcendent and the earthly. It was not a simple mystical vision, but a message from God, showing that there was a bridge between heaven and earth, a direct connection between God and humanity. The ladder symbolized divine communication, the assurance that, despite all human failure, God was still present and involved in the destiny of the earth and of Jacob's lineage. Furthermore, the dream was accompanied by a clear and powerful divine promise. God spoke to Jacob, telling him that his descendants would be like the dust of the earth, and that they would spread to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west. The land on which Jacob lay, which he may not have thought of as important at the time, would be given to him and his descendants. This promise was a renewal of the covenant made with his grandparents, Abraham and Sarah, and with his parents, Isaac and Rebekah. God was telling Jacob that despite his mistakes, he still had a sovereign plan for him and his descendants. This promise of multiplication and prosperity was, in a way, a reminder that God sees beyond human failings. Jacob, the deceiver, was being transformed by the power of God's promise. The dream was, in many ways, a confirmation that God was not overlooking Jacob's mistakes, that in his grace he was beginning a new chapter in the patriarch's life, something far greater than he could have imagined. Upon awakening, Jacob was deeply impacted, recognized that he had experienced something supernatural and sacred, something that could not be explained by human means alone. In a moment of awe, he exclaimed, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." He then took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it up as an altar, anointing it with oil, making it a symbol of his new relationship with God. He named the place Bethel, which means house of God. Jacob's dream was more than a mystical vision. It was a divine confirmation that despite his weaknesses and mistakes, God still had a purpose for him. It was a reminder that even in times of uncertainty, God is at work, offering his presence and his plan to those who seek his guidance. Jacob, upon awakening to this revelation, felt not only blessed, but also profoundly transformed. From that moment on, he would never be the same man again, for God's promise gave him a new identity, a new hope, and a new path. This moment of revelation at Bethel was pivotal for Jacob, as it marked the beginning of his spiritual journey. God, with his presence and promise, gave Jacob the confidence to face the challenges that would come in his life and the certainty that he would always be with him, even when times were difficult. The ladder that Jacob saw in his dream has become an eternal symbol of how God connects with humanity, bringing peace and guidance even in life's darkest moments. Jacob, after having deceived his father Isaac and run away from home to escape the wrath of his brother Esau, arrives at the home of his uncle Laban. There he falls in love with Rachel, Laban's daughter, agrees to work 7 years to marry her. However, Laban, in an act of cunning, deceives Jacob by substituting Rachel for his eldest daughter, Leah, during the wedding night. Jacob only realizes the deception the next morning and, furious, confronts Laban. Laban then offers him the possibility of also marrying Rachel, but only after 7 more years of work. Jacob, although feeling wronged, accepts the deal and marries Rachel after working another 7 years. However, this situation creates a tense family environment, as Jacob finds himself married to 2 sisters, which generates rivalry between them. Leah, who feels rejected by Jacob, begins to have children, while Rachel, who was his beloved wife, remains barren for a time. The competition between the sisters for Jacob's affection and attention generates constant conflicts in the home. But God, in his sovereignty, uses this scenario to fulfill his promises. God blesses Leah with children, including Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And Rachel eventually conceives Joseph and later Benjamin. Each of these children would play a pivotal role in the formation of the 12 tribes of Israel. Despite family, difficulties, and rivalry between wives, God fulfills his promise to Jacob, using the most challenging circumstances to begin building the people of Israel. The story of Jacob with Laban, Leah, and Rachel shows how God can transform even difficult situations into a greater divine plan. After years of hard work in Laban's house, Jacob decided it was time to return to his homeland. However, he knew that his return would not be easy. The last time he had met his brother Esau, their relationship had been marked by deep animosity. Esau, enraged by the loss of his blessing and Jacob's betrayal, sworn to avenge him, and Jacob knew that this threat still hung over him. The fear of facing Esau was great, for Jacob did not know what awaited him upon his return. Fear, however, led him to deeply reflect on his past mistakes and what he truly wanted for the future. With a heavy and anxious heart, Jacob made the decision to seek divine help before anything else. He prayed fervently to God, asking for protection and guidance. In his prayer, Jacob reminded God of the promises he had made to his parents, and to himself, pleading for divine mercy to be poured out upon him despite his past mistakes. He knew that he could not rely on his own strength and cunning to deal with the situation. So Jacob placed himself in God's hands, seeking not only physical protection, but also reconciliation with his brother and his own past. Jacob, in preparation for the encounter, decided to send gifts and messengers ahead in order to appease Esau's anger. He sent a large quantity of good sheep, goats, oxen, and camels in an attempt to earn his brother's forgiveness. Jacob knew that with these gifts, he was not only seeking reconciliation, but also trying to appease Esau's anger and offer something of value in exchange for the forgiveness he feared he did not deserve. Deep down, however, Jacob feared that these gifts would not be enough, and that Esau's anger ran even deeper than he realized. When the time came for the meeting, Jacob, filled with anxiety, saw Esau in the distance, accompanied by 400 men. Jacob's fear reached its peak, but he did not give up on confronting his brother. Surprisingly, when Esau approached Jacob, he showed no anger or desire for revenge. Instead, he ran to meet Jacob, embraced him, and kissed him, demonstrating forgiveness and reconciliation. This unexpected gesture by Esau not only healed the wound between the two brothers, but also revealed the powerful action of God. God, in his mercy, had worked in Esau's heart, transforming a desire for revenge into an act of forgiveness. Encounters symbolized how God can restore broken relationships, bringing healing where there had previously been pain and separation. Jacob, touched by this act of kindness, recognized that God had powerfully intervened in his life, restoring what seemed lost forever. On the night before the much-feared encounter with Esau, Jacob was alone in a secluded place, in a moment of great anguish and reflection. Anxiety about what would happen to his brother, coupled with insecurity about his future, left him in a state of emotional vulnerability. Feeling surrounded by feelings of guilt and fear, Jacob did not know what to expect in the future. But he needed to somehow deal with the weight of his past. It was on that tense night that he had a profound spiritual experience that would change his life forever. While Jacob was standing by the river Jabbok, something inexplicable happened. A mysterious man appeared and, without warning, began to wrestle with him. The fight was intense and lasted all night, a physical confrontation that seemed to be more than just a physical battle. As the fight progressed, Jacob realized that this man was no ordinary person. His opponent's strength and endurance were supernatural, and no matter how hard Jacob struggled, he could not prevail. However, instead of giving up, Jacob resisted with all his might, determined not to let his opponent go without a blessing. At the climax of the fight, at dawn, the man touched Jacob's thigh, dislocating it, causing intense pain. This seemingly simple touch was a sign that the man was no ordinary adversary, but someone with divine power. Even in the pain, Jacob, stubborn and determined, clung to this man, refusing to let go without receiving a blessing. This moment of persistence and faith showed Jacob's true character, a man who, despite his flaws, deeply desired God's favor and was willing to fight for it. The man then revealed his identity, saying that he was a heavenly being, probably an angel or a manifestation of God. He blessed Jacob by giving him a new name, Israel, which means one who strives with God. This new name symbolized Jacob's transformation from a cunning and deceitful man to someone who would now be a spiritual leader, one who would strive not only against men, but also against God, seeking his will and purpose. The change was profound, for after this experience, Jacob would never be the same. He bore a physical mark, a dislocated thigh, as a reminder of his struggle and spiritual transformation. And this experience prepared him to face his future with new faith and trust in God. After the life-changing experience at the Jabbok River, where Jacob wrestled with the angel and received his new name, Israel, his life entered a new chapter. He was no longer the man who had deceived his father and used cunning to get what he wanted, but now he was a man who bore the mark of wrestling with God. This new name, Israel, became a symbol not only of Jacob's inner change, but also of the new destiny he was about to experience. He became the patriarch of a great nation, whose children, born of his wives Rachel, Leah, and their handmaids, would form the 12 tribes of Israel, each with its own role in history and in the building of God's chosen people. Despite his failures and challenges throughout his journey, including family conflicts with his wives and children, and difficulties in his relationship with his brother Esau, Israel remained steadfast in the promises made to him by God. Jacob, Israel's life was marked by hardships, but also by moments of profound faith. He was able to trust in God's promises, even when circumstances seemed to be against him. His faith was tested on several occasions, such as when he was forced to send his son Joseph to Egypt and later had to deal with the consequences of that decision. However, God, as always, was with him, guiding him and showing him that even in the midst of hardships, he was faithful to the promises he made. The history of Israel, now with its 12 tribes, reflects God's faithfulness to his word. Although his children faced challenges, including the sale of Joseph into Egypt and the suffering that this caused to Israel, God's promise was fulfilled. Israel's descendants spread throughout the land, and through his children, the people of Israel multiplied. Each of the tribes that arose from his children played a crucial role in biblical history, whether as warriors, leaders, or prophets. Through the tribes of Israel, God prepared the way for the coming of a Savior, Jesus Christ, thus fulfilling the divine purpose that had begun with the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and finally to Jacob. The legacy of Israel, the man who wrestled with God, left a mark on the history of God's people and an example of how, even with failures, God's faithfulness never fails. If you liked this incredible story and want to continue following our content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the bell to receive notifications and stay up to date with everything we have prepared for you. And don't forget to comment below what you thought of the video and share your thoughts.